Just to warm you up for day 2, we'll give you a bit of a recap, and please bear with me that I cannot do justice to the very rich discussion that has happened yesterday, because I can only give you a few sound bites as to what has happened in day 1. I'll start with that before I'll pass a few messages on housekeeping, and then I will be honored and have the pleasure to introduce our actually into opportunities. We equally have seen again and again the clear and high leadership that Kenya has demonstrated in this global agenda, but as well that the European Union, notably through its Green Deal approach that we are rolling out in Europe, but as well in our partnership with third countries, really takes this topic very, very seriously. And finally, financing is a topic that one cannot avoid to taking on, because we have again realized that the huge amount of resources that are going to be needed to address these challenges, and that alternative innovative mechanisms are high in demand. And again, a partnership between the European Union, notably its development banks, and of course the European Investment Bank, are critical in this endeavor. We furthermore have seen the high commitment by the European Union member states to partnering with Africa, to partnering with Kenya, and many of our partners on call yesterday, as it was Ireland, Denmark, and Sweden, just as a small representation of our EU member states, have shown how much they are willing as well to partner on climate change matters, on biodiversity matters, on environmental matters in its partnership with Kenya. Another outcome was very clear that you can nowadays not talk about any topic without taking into account COVID, of course. And it was really a lot about how turning the threat that is being offered, presented by COVID to environment and climate change really into opportunities, and that we need a green recovery that is really building back better and greener in order to see the opportunities arising from here. And last but not least, I think it's important as well that Europe and Kenya, I think, are very like-minded when it comes to the values, and it needs to be a value-based approach as well that does not just focus on environmental matters, but as well on issues of equity, of equality, of not forgetting, not leaving the poorest behind, that suffer mostly from COVID, but as well from all the environmental challenges that we face nowadays. And hence a value-based approach is very, very important. And now let me just give you a few quotes that I think were very pertinent and very telling from yesterday's engagement. And allow me again to start with His Excellency, Mr. Kariappa Tobiko, who put forward something that really resonated, I think, throughout the whole conference yesterday, when he said that I support that the EU Green Deal really is about making peace with nature. And this approach of making peace with nature really, I think, is at the core of what really matters. And equally, our commissioner for environment Mr. Sinkevicius put forward that we shouldn't just talk about environmental policies anymore, but build policies with structural environmental aspects, which means environment cannot be compartmentalized anymore somewhere on the side, but it has to be everywhere, and it has to be mainstream in the true sense to be at the core of all policies, and policies need to be coherent in this respect. And I think he pointed really about talking about the Green Deal, about what it matters in terms of climate, biodiversity, circular economy, and the blue economy as well. And he made a very strong point and an offer that we are pursuing to bring an EU mission on circular economy together with the private sector and investors into Kenya to have a really sound debate about how the circular economy and how the partnership around that can be taken forward. Just a few others I wanted to mention. His Excellency Najib Balala, he really pointed about the link as well between environment, biodiversity, of course wildlife as well, and tourism, and how we need to find different approaches nowadays, different models, economic models as well, that take things into account. And he pointed strongly into technology as well, how important technology is in this respect to be a conducive factor in a different model of driving our economy and our society. And furthermore, on the financial side, I can only pick up a few ideas. We had the governor of the central bank and as well cabinet secretary for finance pointing out that we need as well, if we want to have the necessary financial means, we need to make sure that all financial services need to be green at each step, and that innovation and partnership is really needed in this. And Siatani and His Excellency Patrick Njoroge really made a very strong statement around that. And last but not least, allow me to mention as well Vice President of the European Investment Bank, Mr. Thomas Östros, who pointed to the fact that the European Investment Bank is the climate bank as well of the European Union, and as well the development bank, so to say, of the European Union, and especially in Kenya. It is a country of green and blue opportunities, and we need to grasp this. And I think he gave very good examples, like the Lake Turkana wind farm, just to mention one, where the partnership and where the European Union played a strong role as well, together with our member states, showed how transformative solutions can actually be delivered. So I just will leave it like that for the moment. I hope it gives you an idea and an impression how powerful the first day of our discussions actually was. And now I think we will move forward, I think, with a fantastic lineup as well for day 2. We have 3 hours today, and these 3 hours will allow us as well then to go into more an in-depth discussion as well. And we have, of course, the Kenyan perspective, again, very strongly present, as well the European Union perspective, and not just the Kenyan government. I would like to outline, I think it's very important today as well to have representatives from civil society, from youth especially as well, to bring your voice to the table today, and you should be heard today as well. And I think this is really important for us. Having said all that, I think I'll stop with my brief recap. And now it's an honor and a pleasure for me to introduce a person that I had the pleasure as well in getting to know over the last 4 years that I have been in business here, both on the trade side, but now as well on the environmental side. Dr. Chris Kiptu, the Principal Secretary at the Ministry for Environment and Forestry. Allow me to say, I think you're a true champion when it comes to Kenya's work on environment, on biodiversity, and climate change, both globally and within Kenya. And it's really an honor and a pleasure for us to have you to address us at the beginning of our day 2 of our European Union Kenya Climate Diplomacy Conference. Dr. Chris Kiptu, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hobart, and heads of missions present, distinguished speakers, guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I'm very happy to be the first speaker this morning to open the second day of the EU-Kenya Green Diplomacy Virtual Dialogue. There is no doubt that the first day set up a high momentum for engagement. Hubert, you have just gone through what came yesterday, and clearly there are many good things that there's a good momentum that has been set. And I believe that momentum needs to be maintained even as we head to the major events later in the year in Kunming, Yunnan province, China, where we shall have the UN CBD COP15, and also in Glasgow in November when we shall be having the COP26. I'm particularly very happy and wish to recognize and appreciate the initiatives that the EU has done in Kenya. And of course, in supporting green investments and resilience besides others. But I need to recognize particularly the work that you are doing on the diplomatic front to transition the global economy to become climate neutral, nature positive, resource efficient, and more circular. I think that is good of the EU, and we shall work together on that. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2015, we know that governments adopted the Paris Agreement to tackle the climate change. And this was followed by the IPCC special report that was released in October 2018 on the 1.5 degrees centigrade. We also have the global assessment report on the biodiversity and ecosystem services that was released by the IPBES in April 2019, which points out that around 1 million animal and plant species are now threatened with extinction, many within decades, more than ever before in human history. And when we look at the next decade, that is 2021 to 2030, we see that it's a crucial decade because nations will set new ambitions on protecting nature under the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, COP15 in China. They will also assess progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. Nations will also be looking at increasing commitments under the Paris Agreement, including setting more stringent targets to carbon neutrality by 2050. Increasing ambition means committing both to decarbonizing the economy and putting greater investment in nature-based solutions and enterprises. I would like at this point to mention, as was indicated by the three ministers who spoke yesterday on behalf of Kenya, that Kenya has done a lot to domesticate and implement our obligations on climate change, biodiversity, and pollution control. So I'll mention a few of these in my opening remarks. First is on climate change, that Kenya has taken a key leadership role in climate action. And this has been demonstrated by the fact that His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta has led Kenya in major events beginning December, January, and even the one that just took place recently that President Biden convened. And Kenya also has gone ahead to submit updated NDC before the UNFCCC deadline of December last year. And in the updated NDC, which we submitted on the 28th December, we have committed to 32% emission reduction against the business as usual scenario by 2030. So we increased our ambition by 2% because we were in the first NDC, we had 30%. The total cost of implementing mitigation and adaptation actions in this updated NDC is estimated to be $62 billion. That's a lot of money. But unlike the first time when we submitted the first NDC, this time around, we are also making a commitment. And we are making a commitment to mobilize domestic resources to meet 13% of the $62 billion budget. So we shall be expecting to mobilize from international sources the balance of 87%. This is an improvement from the previous where we depended 100% for the implementation of the NDC. I also want to inform the participants of this conference that Kenya has embarked on the process of developing the long-term greenhouse gas emission strategy for 2050. And we are making good progress. We hope to complete by end of the year. The NDC target, which is being implemented through our, the NDC target is being implemented through the National Climate Change Action Plan. And this is a plan that outlines for the period 2018 to 2022, 7 priority areas which have co-benefits for climate, pollution control, and biodiversity. Kenya is among the first countries in the world to pass a Climate Change Act in May 2016. And this act establishes legal and institutional mechanisms for implementing our commitments on climate change. We have also put in place a climate change framework policy. And our energy mix has some of the highest renewable energy component in the world. And as a result, we have become a regional leader in geothermal energy and wind energy in the continent. Our innovative approaches to expand energy across our innovative approaches to expand energy access through off-grid solar power and use of biogas are transforming rural populations. However, despite this progress, 80% of our population still relies heavily on biomass for cooking. So this tends to pull our effort that we are making towards protecting our forests, because there is still a huge demand of our forests from the rural population who still depend on it to get power or energy. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now focus on biodiversity. Kenya is a primarily nature-based economy, and we are proud to be among the mega biodiverse countries of the world. Kenya has 22 national parks. We have 28 natural reserves. We have 5 national sanctuaries and diverse forest reserves that range from montane to mangrove forests. We therefore feel that we are connected with the New Deal and believe that the biodiversity conservation should be given the prominence and the profile it deserves. Furthermore, our constitution sets a target of achieving and maintaining a 10% tree cover. And although it was in our 2030 Vision 2030 that by 2030 we should achieve it, our president has actually given us directive that we work towards achieving this target by end of 2022. And we require by then to have planted at least 2 billion trees. And we have set in a number of measures, put in mechanisms to make sure we achieve this. To this end, we have developed a strategy to realize this goal, and we have a mangrove management plan to cater for the blue carbon and enhance coastal resilience. We have finalized our national biodiversity strategies and action plan, and we also are now planning to develop our bamboo industry. We have a policy in place and a strategy. We are also going to gazette wetlands and critical water catchment areas. Furthermore, the Kenya government has committed to 5.1 million hectares of degraded and deforested landscapes for restoration by 2030 as its contribution to the Africa Forest and Landscape Restoration Initiative, the AFR 100, which is a Pan-African initiative that is country-led effort to bring 100 million hectares of deforested and degraded landscapes. This commitment also covers Kenya's contribution to the Bond Challenge, the New York Declaration of Forests, and the Convention on Biological Diversity Haiki targets. Let me now come to pollution control as I finish my speech. Kenya's Vision 2030, Kenya Vision 2030 aims to achieve a zero plastic waste by 2030. Let me repeat, our vision as a country is to achieve a net zero plastic waste by 2030. And the Kenya government has therefore put in place several policy and legal instruments to control environmental pollution and address the threat of climate change. We banned the use of single plastics in February 2017, and we are committed to enforce the ban on single use of plastics and unprotected areas, as well as finalizing and enforcing the extended producer responsibilities. I dare say that Kenya is a champion for Global Plastics Alliance. Kenya has joined the Global Alliance on Circular Economy. Kenya is also a member of the Green Economy and Resource Efficiency Alliance. Let me now finalize with a little focus on EU Green Deal. The EU Green Deal, which was recently launched, opens a window of opportunity for innovation through digitalization and green transition plans, with a focus on a carbon neutral world by 2050, decoupling economic growth from resource use and leaving no one behind. I wish to confirm that the government of Kenya is in the process of discussing the Green Deal through the Kenya-EU dialogue, and believe that the outcome of the dialogue will be mutually beneficial for both parties. Our discussion with the EU under the Green Deal has focused on 4 thematic areas, namely circular economy, smart, climate smart agricultural value chains, renewable energy, and natural capital and biodiversity. Furthermore, with respect to digitalization, we have held discussions concerning improvements in 4 areas, namely infrastructure, skills and youth, business innovation and entrepreneurship, and government. Specific areas for digitalization initiatives include digitalization of land use and land cover maps, tree cover assessment reports, land degradation neutrality targets and their monitoring, mobile applications for monitoring different stages of tree growing, aerial seeding using drones, and harnessing blue carbon through mangroves. Technological innovation must be accessible in cost, the skills required to use, availability, and meeting a widespread need. Leveraging innovation and building the momentum to leapfrog will be critical for Kenya to create the jobs its youth so desperately need. On preparations to COP20, UNCBD COP15 and UNFCCC COP26, we want to say that we have demonstrated as a country leadership by being at the forefront of climate diplomacy through high-level events, as I've said, by His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta. And we shall continue to play our role towards ensuring successful events of those 2 events. I understand and appreciate that it is our bilateral interest with the European Union to approach environmental negotiations in the global arena on a common negotiating ground. We look forward to working with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Highly appreciated, a very comprehensive brief of Excellency Mr. Kiptu. Thank you very much. My name is Karin Boomsma. I'm guiding you through the sessions today. I run the Sustainable and Inclusive Business arm within the Private Sector Alliance in KEPSA, under KEPSA. And we will have a really brilliant lineup, and it's really showing that all the topics that we like to discuss, the climate, biodiversity, pollution, waste, multilateral relations, trade and inequality, are all interconnected. And it's great to see that both on the EU side as well as on Kenya, it's way beyond talking and having ideas on how to tackle this. Today is really to discuss the strategies, the plans, and implementation, and how we can collaborate and merge activities and join forces on really speeding up our transition to a green and sustainable environment and economy. I would like to actually, before we dive into more in-depth discussion and presentations, I would like to know who's in the room. And we would really like to do that with a Mentimeter tool, which is just an online tool. So everyone who's not in our panel session and in the room, virtual room today, can join and also express their voice, their opinion. If you would be able to log in to www.menti.com, you will have to put a code. The code is 53622288871. And we would like you to answer the question so we know who's joining us in the conversation today and also what your expectations are. In the meantime, while you're logging in on your phone or computer to go into the Mentimeter, please also, if you have anything you would like to highlight, share it on social media, and use the hashtag #StrongerTogether. So today really is about identification of actions, opportunities, prioritizing urgencies to speed up the transition for a regenerative, renewable, zero carbon, no waste, inclusive, thriving and circular economy. Welcome to our session today. Please log in. We can have a look who's already in the session and answer for us the following questions. So what are you, in which sector do you represent? You are joining with a special interest, so is there a focus of your interest? And what are you hoping to discuss and look forward for our session, which is going to be another 2.5 hours. Josephine, can we see how many people have been able to log in on the Mentimeter? We swap to the Mentimeter in the meantime. Thank you very much. Oh, that's great. So many people are joining and jumping into this. A lot of interest on climate and waste. We are really excited actually to have the people in the room we are having, and which we will present to you soon, because it shows that the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, but also on all levels of departments on the EU, there are many active departments that are actually implementing and designing plans. So we really look at all those aspects today, and immediately we see that waste can't go without a discussion on climate. Biodiversity is linked to climate and waste as well. Inclusion, inequality and trade are part of it, and we are trying to see how can we really make sure that we work and collaborate in the best possible way to achieve a better future tomorrow. I see a lot of climate interest. Yeah, pollution, not so much. Maybe it's linked to climate and waste. People automatically see that link. Okay, I think that's great. You can still vote another or show your interest for another few seconds before we move on to the next question. Yes, trade. Exactly. Today is also an opportunity to look into issues that are context and country related, but how now to link them to the global objectives and ambitions. And I think that's key also in working collectively and supporting each other, is that we have the same umbrella ambitions and the same goals we're working towards too. But the actions on the ground are different per country and context. And we need to allow space for that and support actions that are relevant in the context. So now we can move to the next question. Just a quick introduction, because we can't do individual introductions for 65 people. We have currently in the room, and then we have people following the live streaming on social media. So everyone who's seeing this and viewing this meeting can join the Mentimeter and can show who they are without having a round of introductions, really. So we have a lot of private sector, which is great as well, because as a government sets up the environment and the policies, the laws, and the infrastructure, and for an enabling environment. The private sector is a lot of the times key in implementing this. So if we look at greenhouse strategy, then we're looking at business impact and business efforts. If we're looking at the EPR, extended producer responsibility, it's up to the private sector to innovate, eliminate and circulate their used materials. If we look at zero plastics, again, we have to look at alternatives, innovations, and see how we can better keep materials in the loop so they don't end up in the environment. But also to invest in alternatives for fuel using renewable energy and looking at regenerative models, for instance, in the agri sector, which is one of the key industries in Kenya. Great, so we have a really nice representation. I know actually there is civil society in the room. They might not be on the Mentimeter. General public might just want another. There are also general public or maybe other. There might be in other aspects like the private sector. Okay, we can move on to the next slide, Josephine. What kind of discussion are you hoping and looking forward to today? So share with us before we start. Practical solutions, implementation, inclusive. Yeah, we see that luckily also the representation of today includes a lot of youth, which I think it's essential not to have them reviewing things, but speaking out loud and being part of constructive solutions. But not only that, we also see that ministries are mingling their efforts because actually the way we are conducting trade is crucial for how the environment is being perceived. So we see that more and more different ministries understand the need of environment, climate, biodiversity, renewable energy, circular economy within their own department. As if we don't have a healthy environment, we also have problems within our Ministry of Health. And COVID has shown us that more than ever before. So actually all the ministries are interconnected and intertwined. And today we see that to really have practical solutions and to really have plans that you can implement and that have the impact we are looking for, that we need to work together and actually see that all things are related. This is also why the multilateral agreements are so important on the level from the EU to Kenya and their other partners. Thank you for sharing. This looks great. I hope we can serve all the wishes and we can start just now. We will start off with a video of the introduction of the Green Deal, very briefly, to also for everyone to understand what's the essence actually of the Green Deal. And then we're zooming into insights of the EU negotiation team and EU Team Europe in the cooperation with Kenya and how they visualize and actually bring strategies to practice. Enjoy the video. Great. So this is the introduction, and I think all the agendas are aligned, whether they are the European Green Deal agenda or the agenda of Kenya. And today we will see how we can bring them together and also discuss, for instance, how relationships work, and that you can't export or import each other's responsibilities, but that we're looking for collaboration. We would start with some insights from the EU negotiation team and EU Team Europe on the cooperation with Kenya and their ambition. And the first speaker I would like to invite is Mr. Dimitrios Zevgolis. He's the European Commissioner from the European Commission, Director General for Climate Action. So welcome to Mr. Dimitrios Zevgolis. And we're looking forward to your insights. I'm looking forward to see him in the chat. I see. Let's have a look. Yes, here's his introduction. Is he in the room, Josephine? Would we like to move to Mr. Anthiosain, and maybe he can kick off the EU negotiations. From the European Commission, Director General for Environment. So a big welcome to Anthiosainen. Thank you very much for joining us today and shining your light from the environment perspective of the EU on our cooperation with Kenya.
Thank you very much, Karen. Good morning to everybody. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be able to participate and speak in this occasion. And having seen all the expectations and the wishes and the interests, I see it as a challenging task for me, particularly for the 79% that did not indicate biodiversity as the first priority. I will hope that after this you will all be convinced that it's an important part and an interesting part. My name is Anthiosain. I work in DG Environment, and I'm part of the negotiation team for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. This is the framework to be adopted under the Convention for Biological Diversity, which is the pendant of the UNFCCC, but this is then for biodiversity. And this post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework needs to be adopted at the upcoming Conference of the Parties, COP15, which is scheduled for October in China, Kunming. And a lot of work has been done, and I will not go too much in the process details, but this is really for us a key document that we really need to have the world agreeing on a new framework. The current framework did not deliver. It had ambitious targets, but they were not implemented, and there was not sufficient political commitment. And as was referred to by Mr. Kiptu, we continue losing biodiversity in an unprecedented rate. And this is really not an issue only for biodiversity itself, but this is also really a big threat for climate and poverty eradication and sustainable development. So we need to put biodiversity, nature, back on a path to recovery. For us, and I think that's actually widely agreed already internationally, it's not enough anymore to halt biodiversity loss. We have been aiming at halting biodiversity loss for, I think, more than 20 years. By now, we have lost so much that we should not only halt it, we should also restore. And from our perspective, the vision should be that by 2030, we should have recovered everything, every loss that we have not been able to prevent in this decade, so that by 2030, we have a net positive situation that we will still continue to lose over the next years, but the recovery should be such that we are already back at the level of now by 2030 and put it on a path to recovery to 2050. In 2010, already we agreed the vision for biodiversity, which is living in harmony with nature, and there are very good words in this. We have to make this a reality and make it concrete what it really means. And I think already globally we did agree on maintaining that vision, so that's very good. And yeah, now we have to develop the framework to set out what it means. Let me list a number of priorities for the EU, and which has been consistent through our negotiation position. And I think actually we share a lot with Kenya's and African priorities. The first is that we want to have an ambitious framework. I think we all recognize, both in Africa and Europe, we cannot accept less than ambitious because we need it for climate, for poverty eradication and sustainable development. We really do not have much of a choice. You cannot just save half and then hope that it will do. That's the issue with ecosystems, is that everything relates to everything. And if you continue to deteriorate, you risk actually getting into tipping points where you cannot stop the changes. A bit similar as for climate change. We really must make sure that we achieve our targets, because otherwise you have the risk of runaway climate change. So there's not much choice but ambition. Now, of course, we also need to make it realistic. And that means that we need to have all the tools in place and then a very clear vision on how we're going to achieve it and make sure that the means for implementation are in place. But first, a bit more on the priorities and the ambitions. We are, of course, also clear that this is not only about conserving nature, it's also about the sustainable use of biodiversity, and also about sharing the benefits from the utilization of genetic resources. These are the 3 CBD objectives, and they're all important for us as for you, and we're very much aware of this. The framework should really address the direct and the indirect drivers of loss. So we need to have targets for the direct drivers, which is about land use change, over-exploitation, climate, pollution, and invasive alien species. And these targets should be as smart as possible, measurable, with clearly identified indicators. And we have a lot of discussions, and negotiations are ongoing really now, on headline indicators. Which are the indicators that we can use, that everybody should use, so that we really have a common tool to measure our progress. We also need to address the indirect drivers of loss. And one big of them is, of course, sustainable consumption and production. And in the current framework, we appreciate that they are addressed both separately, because we need actions on both the consumption side and the production side. For instance, what we have also recognized in our farm to fork strategy, we need to think about our daily consumption. And that's particularly when it's about meat, red meat. In particular, of course, in rich countries, in developed countries, this is an issue. We cannot, there's space enough on Earth for healthy diets for everybody. But in particular, the developed countries, we cannot all eat as much meat as we do here at the moment. So something needs to happen. And to clarify, so that these indirect drivers need to be addressed. This also links very much to measurement. It's about ecological footprint, so that we can really bring back ecological footprint within Earth carrying capacity. This links also to other tools within the CBD context. There's a long-term strategic approach for mainstreaming biodiversity, which is for a big part also about the involvement of businesses. And businesses are actually very much engaged in measuring their impacts on, but also their dependencies on natural capital. And they are very much engaged to work with us and take a leading role. Now, of course, not all businesses are already equally active, and it varies also per sectors, but there are really good front runners, and a lot of movement is going on, and we need to mobilize this. We're really wishing to work with them and do this. There's actually also adopted already last year an action agenda for the Sharm el-Sheikh to Kunming Action Agenda for Nature and People, which really invites for all stakeholders to come with commitments, with plans to do. Again, they should be integrated in an implementing mechanism so that we can also follow up and encourage this and make sure that it happens and that we really build on this. This brings me back to the, well, perhaps just one further example of smart targets. So, because these are things that come up in negotiations, just as an illustration. We had a big discussion on 2 days ago on historical baselines. And because there are some thoughts that, okay, we should really look back to a long past to make sure that we have ambition where we want to go. The point is that if we formulate it in a wrong way, you create actually a lot of confusion, and thereby others may actually abuse these kind of references for not taking responsibility, saying that, okay, Europe or some places have already lost so much biodiversity, we should be allowed to also lose some biodiversity for our development. That kind of thinking creates a lot of risk of not having any smart targets anymore, not knowing where we really want to go, and actually disincentivizing and enabling parties not to take their responsibilities. So the wording on these kind of issues is really tricky and important to get it right. So let's, from our perspective, and then that's where we also really would be happy to work with the Kenyan and the African colleagues, how can we get these kind of wording really smart? We want to have a kind of Paris-style agreement with a strong review and monitoring mechanism. And for us, that's also what we heard in the negotiations, the national biodiversity strategy and action plans, these are already prescribed under the convention. And these should remain a key tool for national implementation. And ideally, everybody updates these national biodiversity strategy action plans within 1 year from the new framework, so that the new framework is really implemented from the start as soon as possible. Now, we also know not everybody is willing to update their NBSAP, this National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, within 1 year. And we have some understanding for this. So from that perspective, we understand there's a need for flexibility, and that could, so perhaps these intentions to implement the global framework can also be communicated in the form of commitments or commitments as contributions to the global framework. Well, then we get into discussions on how to do it. Should be a template, can it be built on NBSAPs? A lot of technicalities, but the important thing is that we get transparency on what parties do, so that we can do a stock take. We should add up what the national, if we add up all the national ambitions, does it allow achieving the global ambition? And of course, then we need to look at the implementation of all of it. So that should be a cycle. And if we discover that it's not enough, we should ratchet up. And one important thing here in all these ambitions, they should not be a pick and choose. We should really make sure that everybody takes responsibility for all the goals and targets. Of course, landlocked countries don't need to respond on marine issues, but we should not make it too voluntary. I think already a few things have been said about funding. Clearly, means of implementation, but also capacity development is key. And within the EU, we are working on this. But it should be clear that international financing on its own cannot do the trick. That will never suffice. And it would really need to be a package which also addresses domestic and private financing. We should also think really about the efficiency of financing. And for that reason, we think we should develop, that each party should develop a biodiversity financing plan so that you have really an analytical, a good analysis of all the sources and the expenses. In this, we should also really look at the harmful subsidies to make sure that we bring them, change them, and get them to the right purposes, and thereby have a solid, systematic approach to biodiversity financing. Two more things on access and benefit sharing. It's a very complicated topic. Again, we are committed, we want to find a solution, but we need to be creative, because this is not an easy one to solve. And we cannot have solutions that actually have such counter effects that there's nothing to share anyway. On the process, we have currently ongoing international online virtual formal negotiations, and it's challenging. It has started a week ago. We see that most connections work actually quite fine. Sometimes there are indeed technical hiccups, and you really have to listen very carefully and hope that the connection doesn't break down. I think Africa, Kenya, and we are really lucky in the time zones, because I really pity the colleagues in Asia and Pacific, which already in 1 week of negotiations had to stay up until really midnight, late after midnight, several times. The challenge what I see here is stakeholder participation, because we really need to have, the problem is time. With only negotiation blocks of 3 hours, it's very difficult to get everybody on board. And there's too little time for really have the NGOs, the indigenous peoples and local communities, and also youth. And let me emphasize and perhaps conclude with this. We need all of you. We need intergenerational equity. We need to have participation by all, and we should have a process that allows this to do. So I've said a lot. Let me stop here. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive, actually, presentation where you link all the discussion, all the points of discussion already together, why everything is interconnected and related. I would now like to give opportunity to Dimitrios Sevgoles, European Commission DG Climate Action. So welcome today in our session, and we're keen to hear your insights as well.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning to all. I hope that you can hear me fine. Apologies for the technical glitch earlier, but actually that gave us the opportunity to hear a bit about the challenges that we all face in the international negotiations from UNTEO, because actually, in fact, we have similar challenges in the UNFCCC negotiations, in the climate negotiations. And as UNTEO mentioned, indeed, we might have been, let's say, we might have had a bit more progress in the climate negotiations in the terms of adopting already the Paris Agreement a few years ago, and while now in the Biodiversity Convention they're discussing some kind of Paris type agreement. However, the challenges that we are facing are quite similar, and maybe the Paris Agreement can also give a lot of insights on the kind of agreement that could be reached in the case of the Biodiversity Convention. So maybe to come exactly to this issue of where we are standing nowadays in the climate negotiations and what lies ahead of us. The pandemic actually has put all the international gatherings into hold all these months. We all know that quite well. You know that also in Kenya with by hosting a very important UN institution there. However, we see that now we are getting a bit used to the facilities that the virtual world is providing. So we already making steps in order to advance our action in order to advance our negotiations. So already in the climate change negotiations, even though that we missed to have the COP in Glasgow at the end of last year, now we are setting up for having a conference at the end of this year in November in Glasgow. And before going there, we need to have our subsidiary body meetings, which are now set for the beginning of June. So quite similar to what you heard from UNTEO about the Biodiversity Convention, our subsidiary bodies on climate negotiations, they will meet for 3 weeks. Absolutely in the virtual space, no physical meetings at this stage, and they will discuss the agendas, all the topics that are in the usual agenda of the subsidiary bodies. It is indeed a very challenging time because in order to facilitate the presence of negotiators from different time zones, for each week, we will operate in a different, let's say, time zone slot. So for us in Europe and for colleagues in Africa, the first week probably will be the, let's say, the most humane in the sense that it's going to happen in the working hours, but the next 2 weeks we will have to wake up quite early in the morning, in the middle of the night, essentially, to participate in the negotiations. So it's a unique experience. It's a new thing for all of us, and I can only tell you how it can go after that happens. Now, what are the challenges ahead of us, though? 2020 and now 2021 essentially were the years that we have put us as milestones in our process, because 2020 and subsequently to 2021 are the years that we were expecting all the parties to the Paris Agreement to come forward with their updated national determined contributions, which are essentially their targets, their commitments for reducing emissions in the course of the next decade. So it is the midterm targets, as we call them. In parallel, the parties were invited to submit their long-term strategies, their mid-century strategies, as we call them. So their strategies to show what is the direction of their countries to get rid of carbon emissions, so to get rid of greenhouse gas emissions in the next decades. So from the side of the European Union, we have already submitted our updated national determined contributions, which is actually an improvement. Our initial target was a 40% emission reduction in comparison to the year 1990 by 2030, while now our updated target is to reduce emissions by at least 55%. So we see a 15 percentage points increase in our emission reduction target. In parallel, the European Union has, well, actually earlier than the submission of the NDC that happened at the end of last year, but in the beginning of 2020, we submitted also our mid-century decarbonization strategy. We presented a strategy that presents a target for the year 2050 of net zero emissions for the whole economy of the European Union. So we feel comfortable in the sense that we have submitted our ambitious targets, but at the same time, we are working with all our partners in order to ensure that we all together, collectively, we can show the ambition that is needed to be demonstrated in the next conference of the parties. So already we had some good moments in the past months. We saw new commitments coming forward from many major economies, starting from September with some major announcements around the UN General Assembly. Then we had some additional announcements presented in December during the anniversary of the Paris Agreement, 5-year anniversary. And then just a few weeks ago, in the Leaders Summit that was hosted by the US President Biden, we heard some new announcements as well. Probably the most highlighted one was the announcement by the United States, which is rejoined the Paris Agreement, and they put a target forward for their emission reductions. But we heard also some other major economies making such announcements, including Kenya. So we saw, as the colleague earlier mentioned from Kenya, that Kenya has increased its target by 2 percentage points for 2030 in comparison to the business as usual scenario. So we all take note of this new announcements, of this new ambition that is presented by all countries across the world. Nevertheless, even if we adapt the numbers that we have seen so far, all this lead to an ambition that is not enough for achieving the 1.5 target that we have put in the Paris Agreement. So that's a very important signal, and we need to do much more in order to achieve that. So that's the challenge number one that we have for this COP, to come forward with even stronger commitments from all the countries that have not presented any commitments yet, and not only for the mid targets for 2030, but also for the 2050 long-term milestone. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge has to do with the operation of the Paris Agreement, and we have to complete what we call the rule book of the Paris Agreement. So that will be maybe the more mundane part of the negotiations. However, it's very important because we need to finalize the rule book so as to understand all the parties that we play according to the same rules. And maybe let's say the final set of issues that we will have to handle with is the topic of climate finance and concerns by parties about our capacity to achieve the goals that we have already put for ourselves. I'm talking about the climate finance goal for the 100 billion, which is a goal that has been presented by developed countries, and it's going through to 2025. So we need to ensure that we as developed countries, we will be able to abide to this goal. But at the same time, we need to start discussions about what will be the future goal for climate finance beyond 2025. But this is a big challenge in the sense that even if we are talking about a particular goal, we need to mobilize the trillions. Climate change cannot be addressed only with specific numerical goals that come from particular countries, but we need to see how the whole financial system can be transformed to achieve that. So maybe I will close with what I see that is very important in our cooperation with Kenya in this context. Kenya actually, we see it as a very progressive country in the sense that already provides a model for the energy transition in Africa. I personally was involved in many energy projects in Kenya a decade ago, and I have very good recollection of the capacities of the Kenyan engineers and the work that they have done in bringing geothermal energy into the grid in Kenya. So there is so much potential. Already we see the biggest wind park in Africa being online in Kenya, and we consider that there is much more that can be done. And in our view, we as European Union, the development financial institutions from European countries, but also from abroad, they can work together with Kenya in order to advance this model of green transition in the energy sector. I think that I will stop here because I see that we don't have enough time, but I will be available for any further discussion during the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and that's exactly what we like to do, to just take this insights further into discussion. What you also said, like one thing is setting the ambitions, but now how are we going to achieve them? So one is putting them on paper, and today we really would like to look at how we can make it a reality. And also Kenya is indeed on some aspects quite a king in leapfrogging problems that we have seen in Europe and that we don't have to duplicate in East Africa and especially in Kenya. So I would like to introduce the next speaker. Due to time, because we want to have those discussions, I would like to ask to stick to 5 minutes for each speaker that will come in the room. Hubert Per, we've seen in the beginning, he would also like to share some of his views on the cooperation with Kenya and the relation between the European Green Deal and the climate, biodiversity and action plans in Kenya. So welcome again, and please stick a bit to time. I know that no one sees my chats because everyone is focused on the story. So I'm going to just wave when it's time at you. So sometimes look at me if you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. I will have the daunting task to try to bring within 5 minutes to the practical application what the partnership between the European Union and Kenya actually looks like in real term when it comes to the Green Deal. And I would like to outline two perspectives. One is the ongoing one, and the second one is the future one. With regards to the ongoing one, I would like to give you 5 topics of examples where we are already very active in our partnership with Kenya and the European Union and the member states as well in addressing challenges and turning them into opportunities, because we are really not starting from zero with now the Green Deal, but we have already anticipated in the past 5 to 7 years actually in our partnership with Kenya that issues around climate, around biodiversity, around resilience are very pertinent and have been very pertinent. I would like to give you just one figure because I think financing does matter, as we just heard from my pre-speaker as well. And that is the current partnership that now came to an end between 2014 and 2020 brought to Kenya only from the bilateral financing 435 million euros in grants. And grants, I think, is an important notion here as well, because these are not loans that further put debt on the Kenyan people. So we work on grants, and we are a sizable partner. And I can already promise you that we heard first indications from our headquarters that Kenya is already being considered as a key strategic partner in Africa, and that this envelope will actually increase for the next financing perspectives that we are currently looking at. So the 5 examples I wanted to give you, just to mention them because I don't have more time. One is resilience, and resilience is at the core, of course, notably when it comes to drought. And our core partner in this, not exclusively, but to mention, is the National Drought Management Authority, who has a strong governmental mandate actually in addressing drought aspects and building resilience around that. But we work very strongly as well at county levels in addressing resilience and in fighting drought in Kenya. The second aspect I wanted to mention is in the area of blue economy, and we have one of our flagship programs at the coast, the so-called Go Blue program, where we work together with the Coastal Economic Bloc and all 6 counties at the coast, and we recently launched these transformative programs, again strongly implemented with our member states. The third one, and there we are investing already heavily, is agricultural value chains, but really with a climate smart perspective. And we have programs the likes of AgriFi, AgriBiz, Switch Africa Green, where the title already tells you what type of programs we are working here, and where we really put the private sector as well in the forefront in creating jobs, but at the same time as well in addressing environmental concerns in the agricultural value chains. We just heard from my pre-speaker as well about the green energy side, and a lot has been said about the Lake Turkana wind park, but this is not the only area where we are busy. Notably, the European Investment Bank is very busy as well in the geothermal domain. We have a last mile electricity connectivity program that I think is very important, and forward looking as well. We are working with the private sector through a program called Electrify, and really come up with tailor-made solutions at local level as well, and notably as well off-grid solutions. And last but not least, in the area of biodiversity, which is tremendously important as well, the so-called Northern Rangeland Trust is just one of our flagship partner, where we, through a landscape approach, really address the triple threat of security, of creating jobs and livelihoods, and of protecting biodiversity and wildlife as well. And these are really transformative initiatives that we are already doing. Now, forward looking, I just would like to mention what is going to change. And what is changing is really the parameters of our work relation with Kenya. And this is happening under the following perspective. Forward looking, everything is around the partnership angle. It is looking at mutual interests with a policy first, a policy driven approach, and where we want to really identify transformative initiatives, larger transformative initiatives that we can implement together under a Team Europe approach, Team Europe initiative, together with our member states, together with our European Development Bank and European Investment Bank. So this will frame our partnership with Kenya. And on the substance, we have identified 3 priority areas. One is the green transition, which is very much going into implementation of the Green Deal. The second one is leave no one behind, which looks really into Kenya having still a 30+% of people living in poverty, with a huge amount of inequality, and we want to focus here as well on the most vulnerable part of the population. That is as well the one that suffers most from climate-related issues. And the third one is about democratic governance, service delivery to the people, looking into aspects of transparency and accountability, and the fight against corruption. And within that, a very strong focus will be on youth. So really, youth has to be at the core of our program. It has to be very gender balanced, and this is important to us. And the digital approach, using digital as an enabler for really transforming our partnership with Kenya in order to create jobs is very important. And in this respect, skills development and education is, of course, will be very high on our agenda as well. So just one last word on the green transition and how we want to implement the Green Deal in Kenya. It is really here about finding a paradigm shift that allows us to find a different economic model that creates jobs at scale for young people, but at the same time does so not at the back of the environment, not at the back of biodiversity and wildlife, but where we find a win-win solution through innovative approaches that really achieves both. And the areas PS Kiptu had already outlined them are really looking again into renewable energy, looking into climate smart agricultural value chain solutions, into sustainable urbanization and infrastructure, into natural capital and biodiversity, and the circular economy. So these 5 topics we want to unpack together with our member states with concrete transformative programs. The likes could be like the bus rapid transit system in Kenya, in Nairobi, that should transform, you know, the transport solutions in Nairobi. Further going ahead in renewable energy solutions, looking as well into aspects around hydrogen as a very transformative new technology. Looking into sustainable green value chains, and of course here looking as well into the whole aspect of circular economy, and really pushing further the landscaping approach, again with an approach to create jobs, to harness the potential of landscapes and natural capital, but without destroying it, basically. So this is the way forward we want to bring forward, and it will be a partnership approach, a partnership with the Kenyan government, a partnership with the private sector, with civil society, with youth, and as I said, in a very gender-focused approach. That is our offer, and I'm sure, and we have seen in our outreach so far that Kenya was very keen in moving forward in that way. Thank you very much for your attention. Over.
Thank you very much for bringing all this to us in a very brief and very efficient presentation, I would say. Great points, and you touched upon almost all angles, whether it was resilience, the blue economy, the agriculture, renewable energy, leave no one behind. So inclusivity and transparency and governance. Then the focus on youth, gender and digital. And again, we try to interconnect all those aspects to really move forward faster. Before we go into discussion, we have a few more speakers that will actually shine a light from their angle on the same. The first speaker will be from the Ministry of Environment, the Climate Change Directorate, so the counterpart in Kenya, Dr. Pacifica Ogola. Would like to invite her to take the floor. And again, I'm sorry to be strict. If you can try and stick to 5 minutes, highlighting the Kenyan aspects and efforts on climate change. Thank you, Dr. Pacifica.
Thank you very much, Karina. Good morning, colleagues. I would like to share a presentation, if that's okay, if that will help us move a bit faster. I hope you can already see my screen. Okay, so this morning, I'm really happy to join you, and I'll quickly take you through enabling policy framework, national plans, highlights of our updated NDC, how we are managing the interconnectedness, the challenges we are facing, and our approach to green diplomacy and potential areas for cooperation with EU. So I think we are all aware that we have ratified the Climate Change Convention, we have ratified the UNCCD, UNCBD Convention, and the Nairobi Convention. And domestically, we have also done a lot in terms of policy and legal instruments, including defining the institutional roles. Over and above the national overarching policy, we have sector-specific policies to address climate change. And we, in addition, have gone ahead and operationalized those policies in terms of action plans, with the latest one being the National Climate Change Action Plan for 2018-2022, with its supporting documents, which I think most of the people in the room are familiar with. And this National Climate Change Action Plan, again, the focus area is on disaster risk management. And we have seen from time to time, Kenya is continuously being impacted on by droughts and floods to an extent that the population are not able to cope. And there's loss of livelihood and loss of land and assets. The issue of food and nutrition security, which is also an aspect of a big four agenda. Our food systems have been threatened by the impacts of climate change because we rely mostly on rain-fed agriculture. Water and the blue economy, forestry, wildlife, and tourism have also been highlighted as some of the areas that have impacted on, and we have come with interventions in those sectors. Again, the critical sector is health, sanitation, human settlement, and resilient buildings, and which also covers issues to do with waste and how climate change is impacting on humans, especially the urban poor, and also the rural and marginalized communities. We have strong targets on manufacturing, focusing on a circular economy and resource use efficiency, including energy efficiency. And then on energy and transport, we have several actions relating to renewable energy, clean cooking, sustainable transport system. All these have cross-cutting issues, including gender, youth, marginalized, finance, capacity, technology, and policy related issues, which are mainstream. Again, we submitted our updated NDC, which is now committing to 32% emission reduction target against a business as usual scenario. My PS already spoke about this in the morning, and with this, we are going to be we are going to start developing a new action plan to implement the new NDC updated target. And because the current action plan is also expected to end next year. In the updated NDC, we are increasing our renewable electricity generation mix, and we're also enhancing resource use efficiency in different sectors. And we are making progress towards achieving 10% tree cover. And you'll see now we have introduced land degradation neutrality, and we have expanded the scope of the area that we are going to plant trees, to grow trees in the next decade. There's also promotion of clean and sustainable energy forms, and a big push to move from biomass fuels. And of course, climate smart agriculture, and very key and fundamental and cross-cutting issue is sustainable waste management. With these commitments, we've come up with a budget for both mitigation and adaptation, and we are committing to support up to 21% of the mitigation budget, and 79% will be mobilized externally, and we are very happy to hear that EU is ready to work with us in achieving this objective. And again, cross-cutting issues in mitigations are also outlined in our NDC. Adaptation, again, is our priority. And this adaptation is also mainstreamed in climate change into several relevant sectors at the national government level and the county government level. And what we have done, again, we've committed to mobilize 10% of adaptation cost, while 90% will require international support. And we focusing our adaptation initiative at the grassroots level to build more resilience through the locally led climate change initiative, and also promoting uptake and use of climate information in decision-making and planning across sectors in counties and also at national government. Technology is also very key, and the technology in relation to women, youth, and the vulnerable groups, they need this technology information and awareness to know how to go about adaptation processes. Again, M&E of adaptation is very crucial for us, and we have also ensured that there's cross-cutting issues on gender, youth, marginalized financing, capacity building, and technology and policy-related issues that will be looked at in implementing our adaptation actions in Kenya. If you look at the new NDC, most of the areas that we had have been upscaled. For example, in energy and forestry, and even in transport now, we are upscaling by introducing new projects, which were not in the original, the first NDC, which was done in 2015, since a lot had changed. We are enhancing clean cooking. There's introduction and mention of contribution of the circular economy into achieving our 32% emission reduction target. We also opened new sectors with high potential for emission reduction and resilience building. If you remember, in our previous NDC, coastal zones and oceans were not covered, but in this one, they are covered. We've also introduced a strong component of REDD+. Mangroves now in this NDC have a standalone section. And also in our previous NDC, we just were open to a market mechanism. But in this NDC, we are promising to operationalize Article 6 regulatory and institutional framework and a carbon credit mechanism to make sure that we're able to monitor and track progress we are making with Article 6. The NDC also introduces a topic on loss and damage and comes very strongly on a role of subnational government. We're in the process of developing our long-term greenhouse gas strategy for 2050, and we've committed to submit this before COP26 or during COP26 to show our continued leadership in this space. So in terms of interconnectedness, we all agree, and we also support the conversation that we cannot achieve the 1.5 degree without integrating circularity in our NDCs and in our long-term strategy, because most of the emissions also from material use and resource handling. And the adoption of the New Deal for Nature on People under the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity will also support our journey to carbon neutrality, because we are focusing, for us, the forestry sector and the land sector have the highest emission reduction potential. So a push towards this, and if we increase our ambition under the UNCBD, then we'll be able to achieve more for climate action as well. And also, if you look at commitments under United Nations Convention to combat desertification and on the land degradation neutrality target, our updated NDC now has factored this in, and this is something that we will be closely monitoring with our colleagues who are handling desertification issues, to make sure that we also reap the benefits for climate and environment and restoration of a number of degraded lands, which are outlined in our land degradation neutrality report. And so for these three, circular economy, land degradation neutrality, and nature-based solutions, therefore recognized in the greenhouse gas emission and resilience building in the updated NDC, and also some of them in the previous action plan in specific areas, which I think you can see in the document. So we also note that implementing mitigation targets in energy, transport, waste, and manufacturing have also pollution control co-benefits, which sometimes we don't capture as climate change directorate, but maybe moving forward, we need to work in a more synergetic manner that our colleagues who are handling air pollution can also capture those benefits that result from taking the mitigation targets. In terms of challenges, we have data, particularly relating to adaptation that can inform our decisions. So most of the time decisions are made on based on personal experience, and we need to partner really with universities and if possible with EU partnering countries that can help us really get into this adaptation space and see where the resilience gap is and how to close it. And then there are also inadequate resources to address climate change impact. The last couple of months, we've had rising lakes, and we've seen Kenyans suffering significant impacts, and it's now raining again. And we do not have adequate resources to help those Kenyans cope with the impacts of climate change and to help them move into the recovery phase and actually resilience before the next flooding event occurs. We are working on operationalizing our monitoring, reporting, and verification system to interface with the Paris Agreement. This is a space where we're having a lot of challenges. And again, I believe EU has a lot of experience in this, and we can coordinate and see how we can support each other. We have capacity gaps from sectors on reporting, which really slowing down progress on national reporting, and also, and this can only be achieved by fully operationalizing the climate change units in ministries, department, agencies, and county governments. And for the local action, we welcome and we encourage opportunities for microfinancing scheme to support green jobs, youth, women, who are at the bottom of the pyramid, in the spirit of leaving no one behind, in order to be able to be self-sufficient and self-sustained and to build a very strong asset base that will enable them cope with the impacts of climate change. When it comes to green diplomacy, climate action for us is not just about mitigation and adaptation, but we also recognize that we need to prepare for what is coming ahead of us and for the negotiation and for taking this diplomacy to the next level. We've had several meetings and activities leading up to COP, most of which have been virtual. We were happy also to be visited by the designate COP26 president, and we were able to exchange our opinion on some of our concerns about the COP, and also he was able to give us the progress that they have made towards ensuring that COP26 does not fail. Last year in November, we managed to train 37 government officers in environmental diplomacy through the UNITA with support of UNCC LAN. And we are also in the process of planning for a pre-COP 26 training for all our negotiators. And we are hoping that we will be able to also get additional resources to do the simulations and make sure that everybody is COP ready and everybody is able to, even for the SBs, ready to engage virtually, because we are in the process of engaging stakeholders to prepare for the SBs. But we don't know how this will happen in real life. So this is, again, a place where we need a lot of collaboration and partnership from an advanced colleague like the EU. And generally, last year, we engaged in a lot of high-level dialogues organized by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And we've also ensured that our momentum is not lost through high-level global diplomacy events. And we want to recognize some of the EU colleagues and UK and the US government who have supported us and ensured that we are not left behind in these high-level events, where His Excellency the President has clearly articulated Kenya's position and commitment to be at the forefront of the climate change agenda. So we are a bit concerned about our virtual meetings, and I think I've spoken about this, and we hope that we'll be able to have a dialogue as we work towards COP26. And what are our expectations of COP26 is that we build consensus and iron out key outstanding issues that are critical for the outcome of COP26, and also finalization of the Paris rulebook with relation particularly to finalization of Article 6 and a common time frame, and also just to discuss other issues that are pertinent to us as a continent, which include the framework for implementation of the outcomes of the Coronibia Joint Work Program, and also agenda item on operationalization of the global goal on adaptation. This really needs to be taken to the next level, and COP26 should be a really adaptation COP and should make sure that this is finalized. And finally, commitment on climate finance and ease of flow of those finance to enable us implement our promises and commitment. How can we partner in COP? We can partner together to make sure that the voices of the youth are amplified as we move in building momentum towards COP15 and COP26, and also identify areas of common positions for the negotiation, and support, if possible, a Kenya pavilion if we manage to go to Glasgow to showcase some of the things that we are doing together that will also be complementing your efforts in the Green Deal, and possibly do a joint side event at the COP, and also help us post COP26. We can work together to maintain the momentum moving into an African COP, which will be hosted. I believe Egypt has already submitted a bid for that. Kenya could not submit a bid because it's an election year. And we don't forget the climate and security issues. Again, this is very important to our colleagues, particularly who in foreign affairs spearheading this, that we as Kenya, we continue to amplify our voices on particularly the relationship with adaptation and security issues that need to be addressed, and also continue to rally our efforts as a regional leader and our work in global diplomacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pacifica. That was great. It was great to see what's already in place and what areas of collaboration are, and where Kenya needs support, but also where Kenya can set examples. And I think that's, we will touch upon it a bit later because we have to run through some more speakers before we can discuss. But I think good practices and already things running on the ground, we can give some examples, and that should be visible actually everywhere we go, and immediately practice what we preach. So we will give some examples later. Now I would like to invite, let me see. Oh, I don't think Mr. Cyrus is in the room. Mr. Cyrus Mageria from the Ministry of Environmental Agreements is not in the room. So we will move on to Elizabeth Wathuti, and her title is actually great, and maybe we should apply all such a title. So not only what we work for, but also what we stand for. So her title is Young Kenyan Environmentalist and Climate Activist. She's a founder of Green Generation Initiatives and the head of campaigns at Wangari Maathai Foundation, a great example in Kenya. I think we should all include what we are standing for when it comes down to climate, environment, biodiversity, pollution, circular economy, and inclusion in our title. So welcome, Elizabeth, and please shine your light on how we can actually really best serve the interest of nature and future generations through collaborations with the EU and Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Elizabeth Wathuti, an environmentalist and a climate activist from Kenya, and also the founder of Green Generation Initiative that nurtures young people to love nature and to be environmentally conscious at a young age, because the young people are definitely need to be part of the solution in shaping the kind of future that they want to see. So allow me to first take this moment to recognize how far we have come on climate, because we started this decade with more technological solutions, political and also private sector commitment to decarbonize. And there's also more public support for climate action than ever before. And this is all thanks to the hard work from so many of us around the world. And that's good news, but there is so much more good work that is left to be done. There's still a huge need for tightening of the timelines of the climate emergency. And this is also evident from the recent UNFCCC NDC synthesis report that shows that the current NDCs are nowhere close to addressing the magnitude of the ecological and climate crisis. So governments must therefore take immediate and decisive action and then begin to act on the commitments. So it's been great to see so many countries and non-government actors committing to net zero, but 2050 targets are not enough and do not also take historical emissions into account. We need countries to commit to deep decarbonization and also to nature regeneration this decade, and also for those commitments to begin being reflected in the decisions that governments are making today, this month, and also this year. And having said that, also, I've also had a mention that about the EU's submission of the NDCs, and it's also clear that the EU's job, on the other hand, is not over with the submission of its NDCs, because I do believe that the EU also has got a key responsibility to ensure that the funds that are flowing into other economies also accelerate sustainable development and does not harm in the same way that the EU's own recovery is meant to do no harm. And with the urgency needed to also address the climate crisis, these plans and the commitments that we are making should not rely on the promises of future carbon removal, but should instead focus on reducing emissions now and on substantive progress on adaptation and the much needed urgent action on loss and damage as well. So the more fossil fuels we burn, the more stress we continue to put on the planet, and we definitely know that. Africa is also responsible for about 5% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, but continues to suffer the most. And this tells us that we are definitely in the same storm, yes, but different boats. And having said that, I think a number of things will need to change towards a just recovery and transition. And for instance, Africa has got the greatest population that is energy poor. And other than the select North African countries and South Africa, the biggest challenge the continent faces still remains avoiding emissions while still developing and improving people's lives and livelihoods. And the continent, and even more specific Kenya, has got the potential of being a renewable energy superpower and even avoid fossil fuel powered industrialization. But this doesn't mean, still doesn't get as much traction worldwide, because the systems that we have in place are rewarding the biggest carbon emitters instead of rewarding the largely clean countries to continue clean development. And also mitigation finance and all the other incentives that exist should definitely go to a continent and to countries that are largely clean and are staying clean. And also, despite the intensifying impacts of climate change, we also don't see the much needed political attention that adaptation and loss and damage warrant, nor the necessary levels of financial investments that are needed. And I think this also needs to definitely change. It is also important that we emphasize on the ecological crisis as much as the climate crisis. In addition to stopping investments in fossil fuels, we have to also start investing in nature regeneration and ensure that all remaining natural ecosystems stay intact. And there are so many great examples of projects and initiatives that are being run to make sure that we are focusing on nature-based solutions, because at the end of the day, we know that natural disasters that are caused by human ecosystem disruption and also climate change are already costing us billions. But we can change the course, and many people are already doing that. And this is a lesson that nature is also highly resilient, and it has been helping us for so long. So it is about time that we also turn to nature and help nature, and by doing that, we'll have helped ourselves. So investing in nature-based solutions is how we are going to do all the necessary work that is needed of absorbing the emissions that are already loaded in our atmosphere and then relocate them back to where they belong, in the soil and in the plants. And I would give a good example of what we are doing at the initiative, whereby we are making sure that children in schools get to have an exposure to nature, because at the end of the day, that natural call to action as a young person for me was because I got to grow up in the most forested region in Kenya, and also the fact that I got to spend time among the trees and among, and close to clean streams. And in the process also have felt heartbroken witnessing deforestation at firsthand. And it's about how do we make sure that the next generation is conscious about how the planet is going to look like for them? How do we make sure that every person is part and parcel of shaping their own future? Because every decision that is being made today is directly going to impact the young people, and the young people are the ones who will have to live longer with the consequences of every decision that is going to be made today. So it is about making sure that we are making the right decisions. It's about where are we investing our human and financial capital. And it's about making sure that the decisions that are being made today are definitely focusing on the urgency of addressing this crisis, because we don't want to live in a messed up planet. We want to shape our own future. And at the same time, we want to see the commitments that are being made reflecting on what is happening. And it's really great to also make sure that all of these initiatives that are already happening with the youth and the civil society organizations also get incorporated into any decisions that is being made, so that they can also get to make a maximized impact at the end of the day. And so when it comes to nature-based solutions, this is where I would dream that your hearts, minds, capital, and expertise will now channel a great injection of energy, because protecting and restoring our natural ecosystems is half the fight for life. And it's also half the fight for a livable future for humanity. And this is what would definitely also make that dream for Africa, that dream for Kenya come true for many young people. And all of us have a vision of how we want this planet to look like in the next coming years. So nature is not just an option or extra. It is part of our essence. It's our natural home, and protecting and restoring nature, as I know from our own lived experience, like I've shared, can definitely also awaken the deep bone, and it can remind us of who we are. And it would be so inspiring to also imagine participating in a great regeneration. So let us continue to make sure that nature is also at the center of this conversation, and recognize that we are in the middle of a climate and ecological crisis, and then begin to take immediate decisive action, because the climate crisis is affecting so many people out there, and we don't have any time to wait for action to happen. It has to begin right now. And as young people, we are also stepping up to the challenge, and are not just asking our leaders to take action, but we are also working on our own initiatives with our communities, educating ourselves, educating our people about the climate crisis. And I think at the end of the day, collaboration and working together at the end of the day is what is going to help us make the greatest impact when it comes to addressing this crisis. Thank you.
Super, thank you very much for this strong call to action, actually, to really work together and restore our relationship with nature. Because if we don't restore our relationship with nature, not really understanding that each action and everything we do has an impact, then we can't actually start recovering and regenerating. I would like to move to Winnie Chepkamoy Mutai. She is from the ACP Young Professional Network, and I would like you to also shine your light on the interest of nature and future generations, and how that can be supported by the EU-Kenyan relationships. And there's 5 minutes, so we have to manage the time. So 5 minutes, thanks.
So thank you for this chance. Mine, I would really like to share in the perspective of raising awareness is a really big challenge, and how do you raise young people to be environmental conscious? So that's a big challenge. And, you know, you can look at the COVID-19 pandemic and the situation happening contextually, and you realize it's very difficult for even organizations to become environmental conscious. Everyone is grappling with humanitarian assistance. And so the question is, how do you, first of all, educate young people to know the impact and the relationship between human and nature? And this is looking at the UNEP recent publication on making peace with nature and the human relationship with peace and nature. That becomes very, very important, in that as we go ahead, how do we ensure that, how do we involve the academicians, how do we involve the knowledge network, right from what I would call ECDs to schools to universities, to really raise this kind of awareness among young people about becoming environmentally conscious, just not in terms of knowledge-wise, but also additionally in terms of just being aware in terms of their conduct. And then secondly, I would also want to share the perspective of circular economy and how this becomes a concept just within the high-level organizations. And the idea is, how do we trickle down these kind of thoughts even to disseminate, and how do we involve all policy implementers to really raise awareness and communicate what is the meaning of circular economy? How do we break it down to younger generations to understand what circular economy is, and how can they apply or be part of circular economy through the different professional networks that they engage in? And so the African Caribbean and the African Caribbean Pacific Young Professional Network has really diverse young people who are professionals and have expertise in different thematic areas. And the question is, how can the European Union partner with them in an effective way to harness the thematic expertise of these young people and engage them, just not only through conversation, but their ideas and how they could be part of this network. And lastly, I would really want to talk about systemic approach and how the question about looking at this conversation of nature and climate beyond the context of climate and look at it from a holistic approach. And so how do we develop a systems thinking approach in the way that when we develop the deliberations and when we develop the thinkings and adopt the whatever we would consider as decisions to enhance our environmental conscious, how do we bring different sectors on board? How do we take into perspective their considerations and work collaboratively to ensure that both the health, the education center, the insurance, the finance sector are brought together to understand what environmental consciousness means in their planning and both in their implementation? Thank you.
Super, thank you so much, Winnie. And I think, again, highlighting the urge for real collaboration and really understanding then where we collaborate, not only having the same ambitions, but also understand where then we need each other's support. So thank you very much for that. I think it's time to move to a small reflection and discussion on what's being said so far. I would like to invite my colleague, Sarah Jane, to lead this first part of the discussion. We have an online bit, which is you can reflect on the questions on Mentimeter again, same code. And we have the virtual live discussion going on at the same time. And Sarah will also try and address some of the questions being asked in the chat box. So Sarah, good luck. We have like 10 to 12 minutes for this and to really talk together about what we've just heard.
Hello everybody, good morning. Very nice to be moderating this part of the Q&A. I think we can start with the pending questions that have been shared on the Zoom of this session. And the first question that we had that was more about the introductory words was that Kenya has not included gasification, low oxygen thermal conversion in its sustainable waste management bill. This could relieve dependency on the forest for energy and also make climate-friendly use of all the low-grade crop residues that are currently burnt, dumped, or left on the fields. What are the government's plans to include gasification in its policies and legislation? I think this is a question for members of government before. If one would like to take the floor and respond to that a very interesting question on the action plan. The floor is yours. You have also engaging with the people in the room that are online. You can also start responding to the Mentimeter question, of course, and share your opinion along with the speakers.
Thank you for the question. This is Pacifica. On the issue of including gasification in the Sustainable Waste Management Bill and Policy, my colleague will be making a full presentation on that in the next couple of minutes. So I think some of those issues will be answered by my colleague at that point. Dr. Macharia is, I think, is in the next panel. Also in the next panel is my colleague from Wildlife and Tourism, Dr. Erastus Kanga. I've seen a question on wildlife tourism. So I would not want to preempt their presentation by responding to this. So maybe if we can move those two to the next panelist. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for responding, for this insight. This panel discussion, this specific Q&A is about the holistic response to climate action and how to actually organize. And I would like to engage the previous panelists on the following questions. The first question is really on governance. And so how to integrate environment into each ministry, and can we reposition the environment as an integral component of all that we do in trade, in health, in finance, etc. So making the environment and climate action a structural challenge and a structural component to all political decision, as it has been shared rightfully by our civil society youth panelists. So I would like to engage previous panelists, also our youth civil society organizations representatives, if you have some more insight on governance and what should be done to make it more structural. You have the floor. I do realize this is a very large question, and this is also...
This is, good morning, this is Hubert. I will not speak on behalf of the Kenyan government, but just to tell you maybe a little bit how we see, in terms of the governance structure, how we want to deal with environment and climate in our approach, and as well in our partnership approach with Kenya. And one thing I think that is important is policy coherence. So we need to make sure that other policies, for example, trade policies, agricultural policies, fishery policies, are fully aligned with other set policy targets and priorities that are focusing on environment, climate, and biodiversity. And this policy coherence, I think, is extremely important. And the decision-making processes around that need to fully include the views of the different ministries as well. And I think in this respect, the environmental impact assessments for big investment projects, for example, need to be done thoroughly and need to be heard thoroughly. And of course, there our standards from the European Union and as well from the European Investment Bank are extremely onerous to making sure that prior to starting any initiative, we identify what could be the potential positive and negative impact of any of these investments that we might co-finance as well. And secondly, I think our Commissioner for Environment has said it yesterday, and I can't find his exact quote anymore, but he really outlined that, you know, that these days are over where we try to compartmentalize just environment into one silo and climate into another one, and now biodiversity maybe in a third one. But all these challenges are interrelated with all our, you know, opportunities and possibilities in job creation, in manufacturing, and in everything else. And hence, it is important that we see the holistic way of doing business. And certainly at the European Commission, and as well in our work as delegation of the European Union and here in Kenya, we take this integrated approach and we look very closely as well as the potential impact that programs that at first glance might not be necessarily directly climate related, but might have a positive or negative impact that we need to be cognizant and address from the very beginning. Thank you.
Thank you for this response, for your intervention. Are we already able to see what were the responses from the virtual room on Mentimeter? I'm not sure if we can already follow the results of these questions.
We can have maybe after this next question, but maybe we share the code one more time. So that people who are not logged in yet, because the first time we logged in, it was just 30 people, but we have 70 people approximately in the room. So maybe we can share the code one more time. Josephine can share the screen. Yeah, so 536-28871. to join the conversation online and actually respond to the questions around holistic response to climate targets. So how we can reposition environment as an integral component of all that we do. And maybe we can already discuss the next question also due to time. Sarah?
Yes. Of course. So the next question is on the challenges of growth and this holistic response, also on how to change the system and create a new system. I would like to target this question specifically at Dr. Pacifica Ogola, who has shared a very interesting and very complete presentation. My question would be how a new system, so a circular economy, will create new jobs and tackle inequality. We have seen a list of leads for cooperation. We have also seen quite a big list of actions to be taken and objectives. And how do we implement that concretely with a circular economy, and also ensure sustainable and more inclusive jobs, especially for our youth?
Yes, thank you very much. I think what the question that you are asking is, if I can interpret it, is that what is the paradigm shift, or what is Kenya planning to do to make a circular economy, enhance creation of green jobs, and also creation of more sustainable livelihoods. I think from our side, we take note that circular economy is already happening in many sectors, but in a way that is not being captured. So the first thing maybe is to identify which sectors that this are already happening, and so that we can highlight them and enhance them, make sure that we exploit the full potential of those sectors, so that they're able to create new jobs. And Kenya has also created special industrial zones, and where industrial symbiosis is expected to happen. So this conversation has been going on, but as a colleague said, I don't know, I can't remember who said it, is that people don't know what circular economy is, or they don't know, I might want to do it, but I don't know how to go about doing it. So how do we bridge that gap between the desire to do it and the knowledge to do it, and making sure that the infrastructure, the right infrastructure is in place. So we need a concerted effort, not just from one ministry, but also a multi-government approach in designing these parks or projects or whatever they are, to make sure that circularity is being taken into consideration. And one thing that I've seen in my short experience in government is that if it doesn't exist on paper, people are not obliged to do it. So we may be forced to come up with an action plan or a policy instrument. But this policy instrument should also incentivize people to shift from linear to circular economy. And it should put in the time frame, because we realize that you cannot just wake up in the morning and expect people to already start moving in that general direction. You put incentives in place to encourage people to do it, and you also make sure that the capacity for people to actually implement this is also enhanced, and access to various technologies that are needed also made available, whether they are appropriate technologies which are locally manufactured or imported technologies. Because then without that, you'll end up with a wish on paper, yeah, and people will continue using, is it fourth generation technology or the end of pipe technologies, if this transition is not taken into consideration, and with a lot of political mobilization and political goodwill to push it forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and for also for this extended information, but also for emphasizing the fact that circular economy is happening and is taking place in more informal frameworks, and that raises the importance also of showing off and boosting the the action of who is actually taking action on the ground. And that was also shared by Ms. Elizabeth Watuti when she was saying that youth especially and citizens are taking action before it is on paper. So this is this challenge of closing the gap that you've raised very well. Thank you for that. While we can share the Mentimeter results, I would like to also give the floor to Mr. Aneteo that has been raising his hand also, I believe.
Yes, thank you very much. No, I would just briefly wish to respond to the first question. I think a key word here is political commitment, and building very much on what Ms. Pacifica just said, Pacifica Gola said, this should be political commitment across ministries and at the highest level. We need to have a really an understanding that everybody needs and to ensure coherence. And in this context, I would like to refer to the Leaders' Pledge for Nature, which was endorsed a year ago, just before the United Nations, before the UN Biodiversity Summit in September 2020. Already 80 heads of state of government endorsed this, including President Kenyatta and also our President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. And this demonstrates really the willingness at highest level, and that's really important that it's understood. And for making that happen, of course, this should not be a one-off event. This is something that needs to go throughout the process, throughout the period. And for that, it's really important to have transparency on what parties do, on the actions, have clear processes with also clear moments in time for stock take and then seeing where we are so that we can indeed keep it on the agenda and realize when we need to do more. One additional thing here is awareness. I think with, for instance, biodiversity loss, but environmental degradation more generally, we are increasingly feeling the consequences. And of course, that helps to build political support for the actions that we need. But let's hope that we do take the actions as much as possible before we start feeling it in the really, really hard way. So urgency. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your additional comments on the topic. I would like to come back to the Mentimeter results, and also while we're commenting, raising this very interesting question, this last question, because of time constraints that we have. What are the plans to engage Generation Z in the transformative approach of Kenya? And this question leads to the last one. I think it's a very good introduction to this third question on food security and sustainable agriculture. Agriculture is a big sector in Kenya. And we know that we can only hold biodiversity loss. We need to restore it pretty urgently. So what does a local resilient regenerative agriculture look like? And I would say this additional parallel question that is very important: how do we integrate so this latest generation very steering the climate action also at the citizen and civil society organizations level? What are the necessary conditions to satisfy both ends, from the farm to the fork, and put nature in priority along the chain? I would like to appoint for this question specifically Mr. Dr. Ayub Machari on the sustainable agriculture and the future of food security. Can you hear us? Or
I think he's coming next as the next speaker, so maybe he can touch upon it after he has.
Please repeat the question. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, for sure. The question was on food security and also parallel the integration of Generation Z and the new models. What does a local resilient regenerative agriculture look like? What are the necessary conditions to satisfy both ends from the farm to the fork and put nature in priority along the chain for sustainable agriculture?
Okay. I thought that is for biodiversity sector, but I've dealt with such a case where we have a development that is happening in Western Kenya, and we were arguing here whether use of agricultural waste to converting it to energy, whether it was a viable project in Kenya. And after a lengthy discussion, we agreed that we could allow the project to submit their application, but deal with that matter at environmental impact assessment level, because the issue of agriculture, composting, and then that competition between composting and waste to energy, is quite a challenge. And I don't want to give a direct answer that about our position, but it is an area that requires a lot of impact assessment to guide decision making. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Ayub Macharia. We will announce you soon for your own presentation. Just maybe to highlight also from the EU side around the agribusiness efforts, that there is the agribusiness project with specific targets for the youth, for women, the small and micro small enterprises, and this is being financed collectively with the European Investment Bank and the Equity Bank, AgriFi project in partnership. So there are many initiatives, I think, that will have a focus on women and youth, because it's key to include them in future projects when it's around climate, a circular economy, biodiversity. These are the next generations, and they need to be able to thrive, and that can't be done on the same way we have currently shown our economic model to be operating. So I maybe, Sarah, we can sort of move to the next presentation also for the time, and show the Mentimeter session again, when we will capture more of your views after Dr. Ayub Macharia speaking. He's the Director, Education and Environment, and I think he would be the right person to really address the status updates on circular economy, also how that we can relate to what's happening on EU level in circular economy ambitions, waste management, single-use plastic bans in restricted areas, and the UNEA 5, the plastic pollution agreement. So thank you for being here, Dr. Macharia, and kindly shine your lights on the circular economy journey of Kenya.
Thank you, Karine. Thank you, Karine. And I have a PowerPoint presentation so that I can be able to make use of my 7 minutes only. And my presentation is on new systems agreements to tackle pollution and waste management in Kenya. Next slide, please. And I don't want to define what circular economy is, but you realize that our economy is not circular. There is a lot of wastage. There are a lot of valuable things that are wasted, and circular economy drives us towards capturing these valuable products making so that we create jobs, we get more resources, and we avoid mining low materials from the ground. And what you realize on waste management, Kenya has already developed a framework, and our framework considers how waste moves from waste generation, collection and transportation, to waste material recovery, and then valuable products that are organic are composted, the recyclable ones are recycled and becomes raw materials again for manufacturers or for farmers, and then later joins the waste generation and segregation stream through the consumers. And a lot of emphasis on prevention and reduction and reuse, especially at the consumer level before it is declared as waste and can move back to the chain. There was a question that was asked about agricultural waste, that it is not captured in the waste bill and policy. And actually it is addressed because, as you can see, the red part has captured waste to energy, and in our estimation, from the data we have in Kenya, we have reserved 5% of our waste to be the waste that cannot be, needs to go to energy. And this will mainly be that waste that is not appropriate for composting. And I've talked about the project that we have in Western Kenya, and it was considered mainly because of that 5%. And after the arguments that the waste that they are dealing with is not easy to compost. And then we have the waste to landfill component that is 5%. So this is the framework that we are operationalizing in Kenya. We have a solid waste management policy and bill, which have already been considered and approved by cabinet. And this is the cycle that the framework that we are using, and it will create a lot of jobs for our people, because as you can see, the value chain is broader. For each step on the way, there is some money, there is some job, there is some initiative that is created there, other than before when we had only mixed waste going to the dump site for dumping. In Kenya, we can talk of not having dump sites anymore. Other than the sustainable waste management policy and bill, we are also engaging at UNEA, where there is a discussion that is ongoing about plastic pollution. And Kenya was leading Africa in these discussions. It was was leading Africa in the Bureau. And the aim is a global common vision towards the elimination of all discharge of plastic into the ocean, where we want to reduce the consumption of plastics, remediation or prevention of future additional discharges of plastics, prevention of environmental harm from plastics, address where the plastics have impacts on nature, and then clarifying roles of state and non-state actors in tackling plastic pollution. And Kenya supports strongly the ongoing discussion to consider negotiating a new global legally binding agreement on plastics. So not just an agreement, but a legally binding one where there are obligations that parties are supposed to implement. So Kenya is strong on that. It's one of the initiatives that we are championing. Next slide. Then in Kenya, we have the single-use plastics ban, which started in 2017 with a ban on manufacture and use of polythene bags nationwide. So we are not expected to have polythene bags in the country, except those ones that are for primary packaging. That's what are allowed through licensing. And the licensing condition is that they must be members of an EPR scheme, Extended Producer Responsibility Scheme. And then in 2019, we have the ban on single-use plastics in protected areas, which we are also implementing. And the ministry and the private sector released single-use plastic guidelines to guide the stakeholders on what kind of single-use plastics are we considering. And we borrowed a lot from the EU SUP categorization when we were developing our guidelines. And what is happening now is that we have quarterly consultations going on implementation of the ban. So we have quarterly meetings between Kenya Wildlife Service, Kenya Forest Service, and other agencies that are in charge of the protected areas. I would wish to highlight the importance of EPR regulations because they are helping to build on the SUP single-use plastics ban. We have already finalized the EPR regulations in consultations with the stakeholders, and we are only awaiting enactment. And in these regulations, 19 products are subject to extended producer responsibility. And these are products that, because of their volumes, because of their pollutant nature, they fit into that category of the 19 products. And the private sector and other stakeholders have already agreed on the 19. And what we are doing now is we have started sensitization to facilitate the producers so that they are ready for registration by NEMA. They are supposed to register as producers and then come together and establish producer responsibility organizations. And within the producer responsibility organizations, they are supposed to run EPR schemes. So we have commenced sensitization so that very soon we will have these 19 EPR schemes in place, 19 PROs in place to run the EPR schemes. And so this leads me to our request, or the way forward, where we can collaborate with the EU. Number one, we wish to collaborate in extending the circular economy approach to other sectors. For example, wastewater, we have already started on wastewater. We have already progressed well with solid waste, with the help from Danish government, Netherlands government, Germany, as some of our partners. Then, for us to succeed in the circular economy, segregation of waste at source is so important. And so upscaling public awareness and participation is key in our success. And so we would like to learn from the EU partners how they did public awareness, and we would also like to be supported in this venture. Then we would like to enhance facilitation for circular economic practice. So those good practices that are all over the world, we would like to learn about them. The government would facilitate, especially the learning of the producer responsibility organizations. And of course, we expect that the European Union partnership will have space there. And finally, we would like to strengthen knowledge sharing and networking within the circular economy community of practice. There are so many good practices all over the world. We would like this country to be sharing our practices with our other international partners. And I think EU, you have a lot of these good practices. We are ready to learn from you and partner with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Macharia, for explaining to us that circular economy is not only about waste, and that it is actually applying to all sectors, and that we need each other's support to show that and to really change systems and be all in. I think we can touch upon some practical examples later. It's great that you already mentioned that. I would like to invite your colleague, Dr. Erastus Kanga, because that will bring also maybe together for instance, circular economy and single-use plastic ban in restricted areas, and now looking at Ministry of Wildlife and Tourism, and shining his light on how those kind of things come together within the Ministry of wildlife and tourism. So thank you for being here, Dr. Rastes, and kindly take the floor.
Thank you, Karim. I hope I'm audible. I am out in Masai Mara, so my network is not very well, but I'll try to do my best. My 7 minutes this morning or this afternoon are going to be spent on views on urgent needs for holistic models to create resilient environment, biodiversity, wildlife in harmony with tourism and communities. You realize how difficult it is to make a presentation after eminent presenters. I've been doing it for the last 2 days. But my presentation colleagues will go into the very basics, where the rubber meets the road, in the rangelands where we find our biodiversity and our wildlife. And I would want to emphasize 3 key things that most probably people know about, but it is always going to make them the foundation as we progress into how practical things can be put on the tables here. Number 1, it is that degradation and loss of wildlife habitat, especially grants and associated and water resources, has seriously been accelerated by climate change. What we see in this is that this has led to human pressure on ecosystem resources and depletion of resources that wildlife depends on. And consequently, there are dramatic changes in how our wildlife is resilient. And the second point that comes out is that the longer period of droughts and floods are resulting to increased human-wildlife conflict due to competition for resources between wildlife, livestock, and communities. This particular aspect is having a serious financial implication on the government of Kenya, whereby we have to compensate for all the incidences of human-wildlife conflict. Number 3, colleagues, you realize that under the pressure of climate change, especially in the rangeland, there is a general loss of livelihood among us communities, and this has led to poverty and, most importantly, over exploitation of resources such as overfishing, water abstraction, firewood, and charcoal burning, among others, which are actually making the climate change impact even more worse. But overall, there is a general decline in wildlife population and linkage of habitats that are part of the wildlife viewing industry. The current scenario, colleague, is under the climate change impact, is that the resilience that wildlife needs is being lost as our climate changes. Number 2 is that the implication of climate change is on the space and resources that wildlife requires. Places, habitats, and ecosystems are becoming drier or wetter, with seasonality changes being more phenomena. Number 3 is there is loss of important rangeland both in the northern Kenya and southern parts of Kenya, with serious implication on pastoralism and wildlife. And pastoralism and wildlife are all intertwined. Then number 4 is that connectivity and dispersal areas are being lost, while we know wildlife underpins the tourism returns in this country. I would project that there is need to locally and regionally look at the connectivity that wildlife requires. As a region, we need to plan jointly and with the climate scientists and wider environmental sector, because climate issues are multi-sectoral concerns. In addition, we require data to plan, including for the need of wildlife in changing environments and to provide necessary resilience. Now, when we go back into the into the green financing, I would say that to enable Kenya build back better in the face of increased climate change impact on our biodiversity and the current COVID impact, we have to think holistically and to broaden the base for financing nature. The green finance funds are required more now to support mitigation, adaptation, and restoration strategies at area, habitat, and ecosystem level. Our proposal from a wildlife point of view are 2. One is that we require increased community participation and in decision making and benefit sharing from biodiversity and natural resources. This is the only way we can bring them on the table and encourage them to undertake actions that are going to mitigate and improve the resilience of our environments. Number two is we need to create incentives for local communities to keep their land open for biodiversity and wildlife, and also for restoration programs. As I finish, I think we've come up with the 4 areas of collaboration with EU, and these are going to be my closing conclusions. Number one is that the human-wildlife conflict situation must be made into a rallying call for international attention, support, and financing. This would go into human-wildlife conflict mitigation and compensations. Number two is restoration programs for rangelands and habitats are required to improve the resilience of wildlife, livestock, and communities. Number three is that we require support to wildlife economy programs that enhance and increase returns from a wildlife-based economy, especially in the vast rangeland, to go beyond the tourism returns that the communities get. And finally, we recommend establishment of stimulus packages that are similar to what we've seen as the COVID-19 responses, and these stimulus packages would support climate change responses. This can be organized at national, regional, or international levels. Colleagues, I am done, and I would say that some of these proposals and conclusions are contained in the recently approved Wildlife Policy 2020 for Kenya. We have a live document that is called National Wildlife Strategy 2020, and we also have the draft National Wildlife Climate Change Adaptation Strategy for Kenya that has brought all these issues that I have discussed with you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rastis, with a lot of practical examples of the work ahead of us. So thank you very much for that, and also for highlighting where we need each other's support. I think what we will do is stick to time, because other people, we like to have everyone in this room and being able to stay in the room and in the conversation and not losing them now. So if it's possible, I would actually like to invite the last speaker, Mr. Peter Odengo, Director Climate Finance Department of the National Treasury. And then we will have combined question and answers on both green finance, but also the holistic models and circular economy as such. So then we will do a collective discussion. Peter Odengo, are you available at the moment? You can jump in.
Yes, good afternoon.
Thank you, welcome.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. It is great to be part of this discussion again today, after the yesterday high-level meeting which was setting up the policy directives. And as you are aware that the National Treasury and also the Kenya government is very clear and has been leading on matters of green financing, not only here, but also in a number of countries. So what I want to reflect, I will not have a presentation because the time is quite short and we need to keep time, is simply that the problems that we are here today, which is mainly climate change and also destruction of the biodiversity, pollution, and also the requirement that we do things differently, requires that the banking sector, financial institutions, the macroeconomic models that are used to determine which investments are cost effective or which ones are de-risking has to be redefined. That redefining will therefore require the introduction of new indicators, introduction of new tools, which will enable to make the financing of either to sectors which are sensitive to nature-based that are not being considered as bankable in terms of the traditional banking, has now to be brought in within the macroeconomic models. But for that one to take place, it requires a new, proactive, and modern financial policies, because financial instruments and the regulations as being done by the central banks all over the world requires fundamental green shift and green changes so that their financial models and also their project pipelines also has to be aligned with the requirements of the changing world. There are a number of examples that have been tested in a number of countries. For example, Kenya here, we have been testing payment for ecosystem services. But those payments for ecosystem services are done at a very low level and are not backed by effective policy directives which are linked to the banking system, for example, or financial institutions. So the position, if we have to go forward, therefore requires that we really need to undertake a study and relook at the existing financial models, including accounting models, going through up to the professional bodies that are doing this analysis to change and to introduce new parameters that will enable the financing of measures and technologies which are now supporting circular economy and also supporting green post-COVID recovery to be considered as bankable at that level. Another thing is also very important, greening the financial sector. Financial sector is very key because it is the fulcrum between all those interventions. If you look at the flow of climate finance or green finance globally, in terms of the money which has been pledged under the Paris Agreement, which is supposed to flow into the Green Climate Fund, $100 billion per year up to 2020, and also with the talk for highly enhance that, enhance the amount, moving towards the mid-century, requires that the significant flows of that money has been going through our financial institutions, like the banks, others like governments, civil society organization, has been getting less than 0.08% of the total flows. If we look at that, it means, therefore, that there should be differentiation within the financial institutions, of which the existing ones are therefore supposed to create green segments within their portfolios. And green segments, therefore, means that in the short term, they need to start up clear departments, sections, or units which are dealing with specifically green projects, green investments, which are supported by the technical people, which are not only from the banking sector, but also from the technical persons like my colleagues, Ayub Macharia, Dr. Kanga, Dr. Pacifica here, because these are the people who knows which is really being banked. That is because at the moment, adaptation measures, which is very key and which is the priority of the Kenya government, there has not been seen as a bankable segment of investment. If you take adaptation project now into a formal banking or financial institution, the chances of being not financed is almost 90%, because within the system as they are, they don't see them as bankable, not profitable, will not give return for that money. That therefore means that we need to green the sector. But the good news is that Kenya, being a leader in this, has, for those who were with us here yesterday, the central bank of the governor of central bank said that we have already introduced systems for the greening the financial sector, the ones which are here. But also, this will now require a new paradigm shifting in establishing new institutions. And also, when my minister was talking, he said that we are in the process of establishing Green Investment Bank. That is a bank dedicated to invest or to finance or to support newly emerging areas of green. And those are what will give us the change that we need within the financial systems, which are very key in terms of ensuring that pollution prevention is financed. You know, the pollution has already taken place. So we have to remove that. And to remove those pollution, as Dr. Macharia clearly said, or recycle or reuse, you need resources, you need finance. When you want to go to conserve the biodiversity, I hope many of you must have listened to the Dasgupta report review, which now clearly shows the importance of biodiversity and nature-based and the need for monetization of that, and it's used to be factored into our GDP. If we need to do that within greening of the financial system, so that our GDP base is not only monitors based on the trade and the traditional trade nature which we have. The other thing is also the sustainable economic growth is very key, because the long-term investment in various sectors like transport, energy, land use and land use changes, which are very key in terms of emitting greenhouse gases, for example, in Kenya, require that we have green investment that are impactful, not only for the short-term profit gains on the bottom line, but also in the long term in terms of the changing impact. So green technologies are available, but at the moment they are considered expensive. It is this expensiveness that the redefining our financial models requires incentives that will enable the government, the public, scarce public resources being matched and support the private sector, so that the private sector to come in. Private sector under the public-private partnership, which Kenya has already reviewed our laws to align it with this new paradigm shifting in green financing, is going to be a very key driver, so that we, in order to move forward. And also, the risks that are seen in nature-based, like the loss of biodiversity, degraded landscapes, etc., those are the key new frontiers which requires concentration. But the good news again on these areas that with Kenya, we are looking, there is need for look of non-traditional alternative financing sources, such as sovereign green bonds, sovereign blue bonds, sustainable bonds, climate resilient bonds. Those are the monies that can be mobilized from the different sources of the private sector with different angles to invest in these long-term areas with the longer-term maturity that cannot be considered into this. In summary and in final closing, in conclusion, we have set up a very clear green roadmap in Kenya that is very clear, and that can be used, and that we can use as a partnership and collaboration between the UK, which is fitting very well within the Green Deal, and that fits also very well in our financing locally led climate action, which we are now mobilizing the resources to take it at the grassroots level. Finances must reach the last person that is impacted by the climate change. And if we don't do that, we can have them at the top, there is nothing. Because the change that is required, the introduction and the greening of the system has to start from where the product is being manufactured, which is the green manufacturing. Green manufacturing requires safe technology, but it also requires the consumers of those green products. The green products currently is considered as expensive. So the finances need to consider subsidizing those green products, which is required. So in a nutshell, we need to collaborate in areas of newly emerging green finances. That is the green bonds, which include blue, social, and resilient bonds. The second one is also to have work jointly with the EU in order to come up with indicators of monetizing biodiversity as a means for introducing new systems within the GDP calculation from processes, so that we have the value of biodiversity and value nature, so that a county cannot be seen as poor, yet it has got a lot of natural resources. Pollution, we need to clean it. Waste and inequality, we need to include everybody into this by providing them with support. So colleagues, thank you very much. Those are the areas I will be available for a few questions, if any, then see how we jointly move together toward this green process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Odengo. Thank you for being very clear on how we actually move from one green intervention to the other, and how we all need to actually rethink a whole system. I think it's very urgent what you highlighted, that we need a new value set and new systems that are reflected in new modern policies. Because if we just try to change what is not working at the moment, and we want to move to 100% green finance, we can't do that with the same value set. So we might need to change collaterals. We need to look at a different way of what are actually risks. What you say, we need to look at inclusion. If you are not creating a level playing field, then with inequality, we will never reach actually true change on the ground. I think there are quite some examples for that that we're currently facing, with big efforts from both EU side as the Kenyan side, moving towards a green economy and a circular economy, that suddenly realized that we need to change much more than we thought. We actually need to rethink a complete system. And we see that, for instance, also what Dr. Macharia highlighted, if you want to clean up and you want to put extended producer responsibility schemes in place, the private sector can only be responsible if they are also able to recollect and gather their materials to make sure they stay in the loop. And sometimes we need to actually have new laws for that, because if we are a business that provides a drink in a bottle and we can distribute that across the country, but we're not able to actually collect the used bottles back because we need specific license as a waste. Now we are suddenly waste collectors and we're not drink distributors again. We need to rethink how we actually managing all that together. And the same counts for the agriculture and the security and safety of our food. Just very brief before we touch upon the financial aspects in the discussion, but we see in Kenya, the biggest waste between farm and fork is on the farm side, while in Europe, that might be a different story. And this makes us realize that we need support on how we can avoid so much waste on the farm side, which is in distribution, not meeting markets in time, not having the right storage facilities, and also not having the right crops produced at the right time, because we do not apply regenerative agriculture yet. And to just apply regenerative agriculture, smart agriculture, we need, again, financial incentives. And then you said, we need to be subsidized because it's actually too expensive sometimes, the transition to green. And we realize that actually what we have forgotten is that we are too cheap, because it's too expensive because we didn't take into consideration the impacts on climate change, biodiversity, and that's now being presented to us as actually almost unmanageable to finance. And I think it's very urgent that we do incentivize good practices and really push for innovative new laws and legislations, and also make the wrong choices more expensive. So we need to really look at that. And we do have challenges. And at the moment, after COVID, we, for instance, have suddenly VAT on some of the waste recycling initiatives that were actually exempted from VAT. So there you see that you want to make a change, but we can't do it in isolation. The change can't come from one ministry. It needs to come from all ministries. Environment, nature, biodiversity, everything starts with that. Dr. Macharia touched upon also waste and new areas actually for the circular economy, and also including waste and water. And again, all is related, because in Kenya we still build with fresh water. So our massive construction and infrastructure projects are actually built with fresh water, while at the same time we're trying to take better care of our water towers and water catchment areas. And again, we need new laws and legislations to look into how can we actually motivate wastewater treatment, for instance. But it's new, so we need to define it and then approve it. So we saw that as well. Construction is responsible for almost 40% of our carbon emissions. So if we can really apply circular economy to that sector, we would make a tremendous impact, because especially the materials we use in construction are very easy to recycle and to reuse. Metal, steel, aluminium, glass, cement, it's all 100% recyclable, and it's really not necessary to keep on using virgin materials for that. And so are others as well. I just want to close before we go to a few questions in discussion and wrap up. One more example. There was in the chat room, Maggie from Tambuzi, a great example of a flower farm that is actually going completely green and reusing waste, first for like food for their animals, then food for their flowers. Having a complete zero net flowers should be one of the considerations if we attend a live meeting, a COP 26, COP 15. And we try to do that as well with events we create. So even if you're not maybe in an area where the biggest impact is, there are ways to look at it. And circular economy, sustainability and green economy are actually not so hard to understand. It's about our impact and what do you do and how can you do it differently. So refilling water bottles, having flowers that are responsibly grown, where people are healthy while they're working, are all very important circular and green transitions to be made. I would like to now invite Adelaide Herre. She is a program manager at ACP Young Professional Network, and she's also the Secretary General of the African Union Diaspora Youth Initiative. And again, it's super important that we include youth. It's not about our views only. It's actually, we need to work all together. We need everyone's view, from ground to high level, from young to old, because I do think that my grandparents were more circular than I am at the moment. Adelaide, welcome to lead the discussion. We're trying to combine all the questions we have, because otherwise we're running out of time. So I'm inviting everyone backstage, back end, to please go onto Mentimeter again. Please fill in all the questions so we really capture your view. And Adelaide, maybe you can lead the discussion and address specific questions to specific panelists that are in the room.
Thank you very much for your introduction, and as well I'd like to echo what you just said, the need for an intergenerational approach and discussion, so that there is no further inequalities that are created by the solution we're trying to bring forward. So like, as Ms. Karen said, we will try to combine all the questions because of time. And to go back a little bit to the previous intervention by Mr. Odengo, who mentioned this need for redefining with new tool the banking sector, the financial institution, economic model, to be more with tools that are more sensitive to environment, to the planet. I would like to start by maybe asking him, but I direct the question to him, but I invite all the speakers as well as those who are attending to reply through Mentimeters, but the speakers as well to take the floor if you can answer this. So what is the key to a successful new financial models that you suggested already in your intervention, and also how do we motivate green impact investment? You did mention this need for an incentive for investment in this technology that is obviously too expensive right now. Mr. Peter Odengo?
Great. First, great question. Well, there exist financial models. The financial models, as we have been working with banks, for example, in here Kenya, we have been working with the Kenya Commercial Bank, in which when they were seeking accreditation to the Green Climate Fund, and the financial model that is green and recognizing the new way or the new investment is a model that is redefined by the parameters that are responding not only to the economic economic impact and the aspects of the investment. It is a parameter that is designed to respond to one, socio-environmental aspects, and the other one, which is also defined and developed by the innovation, which are looking at the future scenario on how the development is moving on. And then it is a model that is also built on an incremental basis. The current existing economic models that we have, for example, for analyzing investment tools are they reach at a point when the system recognizes the unknown. For example, 5 years ago, anything that is using a technology that has not been tested, or there are no examples online where the system defined that one as not, it gives a higher risk value. That risk value, when it goes to the second analysis, because in the system, there are several layers over the first, second, third. And when it is plugged on and indicates the red, and the red is simply sometimes in 3 key parameters, that the technology is not well known. So that marks that it is not viable. Then the management and the retrofitting and also its maintenance is likely to be expensive. Then it is already been flagged. And then the type of the skills and the people that requires to use it over a time frame of an investment of 5 years, those are identified in the system. The green one is that technology that provides a buffer, because the investment, for example, in adaptation cannot be automatically monetized to realize that. So we have already done, there is a screening that are identifying those risks, and they are being worked and factored so that if you have the green, for example, the solar is now at par with normal traditional fossil fuels. And over the last 10 years, the cost of those ones are now being considered under the normal. So it is accessing, but they are not being used in a large scale. The incentives, there are quite a number of incentives. The challenges of incentive is that the incentives must be targeted. One of the key, for example, either tax exemption in terms of materials, VAT exemption in terms of the products, or creating a green grant for the green manufacturing companies. For example, I've been hearing when you want to create jobs, green jobs for youth and for women, for example, establishing over fund, a green youth fund that they can tap at a lower or no interest rate, returnable or non-returnable, that they can access easily without following the normal traditional business as usual conventional screening that has locked them out. So currently we are working on the green fiscal incentive policy. The green fiscal incentive policy, that is now a framework policy that we are now working on, provides a window of various opportunities for different categories of production of products and enterprises that will allow access to sustainable, predictable, and sizable investment for different categories of the people, which is co-guaranteed by the government, and in this case, the National Treasury, which has never been in. So there are quite a number. Also the intenting, also the negotiation for the new technology is also good as a factor, because those negotiations require high-level skills, legal, management, etc. So they exist, but they are not widely available for different types of users or sectors or investors.
Thank you very much for this very rounded reply to this quite difficult and practical actually question. And it's really good that you pointed out this need to have parameters that are designed to respond to social and environmental aspects, and also just as well to have incentive targeted. And I want to just maybe point out the suggestion you made about green youth funds. This is one of ACP-YPN's wish list, point on the wish list. So just a note on that. Maybe Josephine, can you maybe put up Mentimeter to see if we have some answer before we move on to the next? Good. Okay. So this question, I guess, were also related to the previous part. Maybe can you just go back to, yeah? Sorry. There's a question on private sector that was just, if you can just go back up, sorry. Just one more up where the answers are. Yeah. So I mean, this I think is just an intervention, a suggestion, engaging private sector in implementation, engaging policy formulation and implementation by public entities. I think you also mentioned this, implementing PPP in Kenya during your intervention at first. You said as well, something that's really important here is to have, there is no direct monetization and investment in this case, right? And so on that point, obviously there are new risks that arise with this new, this green finance, and it should be translated into new collaterals, right? So my other question would be, what does greening the financial sector mean for screening and assessment of clients? And if I can also add, thinking, ensuring that we don't leave anyone behind in the process of financing.
Great. Screening and assessment of all clients, the risks will still be there because the new green landscape is young and still growing. But how do we cushion those who would be the investors from that? That is why we are saying that we need to create credit guarantees. We need to establish new banking systems or banking institutions like the Green Investment Bank that will already come in to support those who want those who should be supported or promoted to invest or jump into the new frontiers of the untapped land to get resources for investment fund, for example, adaptation finance corporation, which we are talking about, because that is an area where nobody has ever gone. So when you go into, when we set up new institutions like adaptation finance corporation, which is dealing with the financing enterprises that are engaged within the adaptation side, leave alone mitigation. Mitigation is one straight line emission reduction of X tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, very easy, and you turn it into monetary equivalent of 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. It's very straightforward, everybody is going there. So what we are saying in greening and screening that is that we have a twin approach whereby within the internal financial systems, those who have already been traditionally screened and likely to be subjected not too risky are now taken into the second pipeline of the green investment, where there is guarantee, there is incentive, there is all kind of packages and assurance of the assurance, for example, the consumption or purchase of those products over a period of time. And also to ensure that the reason what I did not say is that the private sector want to be assured that their investment will be consistent with those policies on incentive over a period of time. If you want to make a green glass, yes, the lifespan like that. But the incentives also must be conformed with that timeline. In the past, we have been having incentives which are embedded within the finance bill, which is revised every year. And then an investor cannot be sure whether you will remove an incentive which was put in 2018, 2019, or sometimes imports delay. You may find your product is in the high C, but here at home, we have already removed that incentive. So what we are saying is that we give you long-term, predictable monitoring and targeted incentive, which is linked with the duration of what you want to produce, so that you are sure of when you will get your return. And also we monitor you. If you don't achieve what you got, what you promised, then it has to be removed, because incentive or waiving tax means a foregone revenue for government. But if you use it, then it means that it is generating in other areas, which will still operate on that. So that's how we look at it.
Okay, so we're almost coming to an end, but really thank you for this really short and also insightful answer, and pointing out how incentive needs to be long-term, predictable, and I think the long-term part and the sustainability of responses and solution throughout your answers was, and as well, it's really good that you could show and demonstrate that it's possible to have green finance that prioritize sustainability of societies and the planet as well. So really thank you, and obviously pointing out as a need for monitoring. I'll give it back the mic to our moderator. I would like to do the final conclusion and last words for today. Thank you.
Thanks, Adelaide, for your sharp questions and very relevant. So I would like to, unfortunately, there should be, or there will be, it's not unfortunately, I think we have set the tone, and we know that there is a very big need to follow up these conversations. Some might require specific attention, and we will set up different webinars for different topics, but also a lot of the content will continue being up for discussion between the EU and Kenya, not only in conversation, but also in designing the right strategies and aligning ambitions and efforts. I would like to invite Mr. Hubert Peer to actually do the conclusions of today, and then thank you of our EU ambassador, Katrien Hageman. So Hubert, thank you for your conclusions on today.
Thank you very much. I try to be brief because I will again not be able to do justice to the very rich discussion. And Karen, what you said is absolutely true. This is not a once-off dialogue we want to have on these pertinent areas like climate change, environment, biodiversity, but it should be a starting point and a continued dialogue followed up by action as well that we want to set in the partnership between the European Union, our member states, and Kenya. I just wanted to go through a few points. Dr. Chris Kiptu, he really demonstrated again Kenya's leadership in so many areas, notably on climate action, but as well on renewable energy, biodiversity and natural capital, and on plastics as well. And he pointed out very clearly as well the extension of having a thorough partnership between Kenya and the European Union on the Green Deal. And we are working hard and exactly in forging this partnership together. My colleague spoke about negotiations first on biodiversity, and I think there the outcome was really that an increase in ambition is necessary, and as well with concrete targets and review mechanisms that need to be set. And on the climate side, although this is more formalized, again, it has been said very clearly that the ambition so far are not enough to achieve a 1.5% increase of temperature target, and hence we need to step up when it comes to our global ambitions. Although there have been some new commitments, notably from the US rejoining the Paris Agreement, and that climate finance, of course, is very important in this respect as well. I won't go any much further into what I had outlined beforehand, but just to mention again that the Green Deal and the partnership that the European Union wants to set up with Kenya around these matters is a sincere and a strong one, and we will work together with Kenyan partners, the government, but as well youth, private sector, civil society, to build a comprehensive partnership around that. Dr. Pacifica has outlined all the climate change priority areas that Kenya has, and I will not name them again, but it was very comprehensive and has shown as well the holistic approach that Kenya puts forward here. She had alluded as well to the financial aspects and to the challenges related to finance such an ambitious agenda, and again outlined the extent, the offer of a partnership with the European Union that we are certainly willing to pick up on issues that are on the one hand on the global negotiation side, being setting joint positions, having maybe side events together, but as well at the local side, where we can certainly partner with Kenya on many of the matters that you have outlined. Elizabeth and Vinny have spoken a lot about the power and the need to include youth in this, as well to educate young people and to bring education into the domain as well in terms of our discussions topics today, and as well to amplify really the voice of youth. And there was a call for action for nature-based solutions. I think this is important to reiterate. On the side on plastic pollution, I think here again, I think the extended producer's responsibility is an absolute priority area where the European Union is very keen in wanting to partnering, and we want to really bring in our member states here as well, so that the request to facilitate learning from good practice, maybe from our member states, and as well knowledge sharing and networking is something we will absolutely pick up and see what we can do around that. Erastus has spoken short but very, very powerfully about rangelands, biodiversity and wildlife, and the human-wildlife conflict, and how much the pressure on natural resources, and as well poverty that people face basically lead to over-exploitation as well, and that we need to work on this very complex matter in order to find a comprehensive solution. And last but not least, Peter Otengo, greening the financial sector. I think it says it all. How to do that is, of course, more complicated, and indeed, new financial instruments and new institutions are needed here to harness the vast financial resources that are notably out there as well in the private sector. I think this is what we had discussed today, bringing it together with today and tomorrow before I hand over to Katrin, is really that we have seen that more needs to be done. I think that's one of the first key messages, that the targets need to be more ambitious in order to address the tremendous challenges. That the EU and the member states and Kenya have actually very similar like-minded approaches, and that we really need to step up our partnership actually. In talking about partnership when it comes to my business, EU-Kenya, the Green Deal is really something that we will embrace at Kenya level, and we will domesticate, so to say, to the Kenyan needs and necessities, and we will really forge a strong partnership around that. So this would be my conclusive remarks, but I will hand now over to Katrin Hagemann, our Ambassador of the European Union to Kenya, Chargé d'Affaires currently, to extend a word of thanks to you. Thank you very much, and over.
Thank you, Hubert, for so ably moderating and together with Karen the second day. I apologize that I'm now doing this by phone, but I had another engagement in between, so I'm just rushing into this. But I have followed most of yesterday and today, all of yesterday and most of today, and I think I want to once more thank all the speakers, all the participants, and all the listeners for making time for these 2 days, for contributing to the discussion, and to be part of our reflections on this. I also want to thank all the activists out there for continuing to put us on the spot and to hold us to account. And you know, we may need some pushing from time to time, so thank you for that. My sort of very quick conclusions from my side is really that we've seen from yesterday and from today quite a high alignment between Kenya and the EU and its member states on the urgency of action, and the willingness to move forward in our bilateral work, but also in multilateral fora. And Hubert just outlined this in our commitment for our bilateral work and for the future, that we are continuing to plan to work on the Team Europe initiatives together with our member states and with Kenya on the Green Deal, and to continue talking with the government on how we can support Kenya in its efforts on this. And finally, this is a promise that this is not the end of a conference, but this is the beginning of a conversation, and that we will continue on this path and will continue to reach out, and we encourage you to do the same. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for your engagement, and I wish you a good day and much success in our continued work on this. Asante sana.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. And please reach out. We will try to link everyone up where necessary and needed, and also leave your reviews on the Mentimeter. Thank you. Have a great day.